I think it's time for people to wake the heck up and stop looking at gold and silver to make money and look at it for what it is. It is a life raft in a boat that's about ready to go over the falls. And I think it's time for people to understand that. And today's market action, I think, kind of explains that.
Andy Schectman discusses several recent events indicating a trend of countries moving away from the U.S. dollar in their trade and financial transactions. The examples include Saudi Arabia forming a trade alliance with China, Russia, India, and Pakistan, China and France completing their first natural gas trade using the Chinese yuan, Brazil and China settling trades in their own currencies instead of the U.S. dollar, and several other instances. This trend has significant implications for the U.S. dollar's role as the global reserve currency and the geopolitical landscape.
Let's just run through several of them real quick. One, you have Saudi Arabia entered a trade alliance with China, Russia, India, and Pakistan in an attempt to step further away from the reliance on the dollar. This is all in the last week, okay? This is since we've last talked. You have China and France completing the first liquid natural gas trade using Chinese yuan, of course, ending the reliance on the U.S. dollar for energy trades. You have China and Brazil, who is the second largest exporter of corn in the world, is now settling trades in their own currencies, ditching the dollar. You have a representative of the Russian State Duma. He's the State Duma deputy, and that's kind of like a branch of the government, that says what we already knew, that Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are developing a new currency, and that these currencies will have this new reserve currency pegged to commodities. You have Saudi Arabia partnering with China to build a Chinese oil refinery for 83.7 billion yuan, or $12.2 billion. We talked about last week Kenya signing a deal with Saudi Arabia and the UAE to buy oil with Kenyan shillings instead of US dollars, and the president of Kenya telling its citizens to get rid of US dollars or go see the nurse because within 2 weeks something will happen.
Andy Schectman discusses various geopolitical developments, including protection agreements with Russia and the possibility of a unified currency within the BRICS backed by gold and other commodities. Also, NATO's actions in Finland, and the reports of North Korea sending troops to fight in Ukraine alongside Russia. He also mentions the significant amount of money that has been withdrawn from banks in the past week, and he highlights the potential financial implications of these developments.
You know, if you're going to break free from the dollar and the petrol reserve standard, then certainly having your ducks in a row in terms of protection. We've talked at length about how they've signed the protection agreement with Russia, and now they joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. You're talking about being protected from the West and the ramifications of leaving the petrodollar. We learned again about the BRICS currency, that it would be backed by gold and commodities such as rare earth metals. This was a new interview given by a Russian finance guy with the last name of Babakov, and he said it left open the possibility of a unified currency arising within the BRICS, potentially backed by gold as well as other commodities such as rare earth elements or land. And then you have, from the stupidity department, NATO fully to adopt Finland, further antagonizing Russia. And from I can't confirm this was issued by a Russian special military, or excuse me, a Russian state TV war correspondent has claimed that North Korea is preparing to send 500,000. It's weird because one says 500,000 and the other says 50,000. So let's go with 50,000 troops to the Ukraine to fight alongside Russian troops. And again, we talked about $126 billion pulled out of the banks in this last week. So when you talk about the things that we've been talking about, you can see they are accelerating greatly.
Andy Schectman focuses on the acceleration of global trends away from the U.S. dollar and towards alternative currencies and protection agreements. The potential for Mexico to join the BRICS is discussed, as well as the rumors of Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. He also delves into the current state of affairs in the U.S. and how it is perceived by the rest of the world. He touches on the U.S. monetary and fiscal policies, the Trump administration's arrest, and the importance of gold and silver as a life raft.
And you talk about Saudi Arabia moving away from the dollar and now aligning themselves with all of these countries and formally applying for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This is a very big deal. It's getting closer and closer to that moment that Mike Adams calls Operation Sandman, where the countries just say we're done with the dollar because it is no longer the reserve currency, the petrol reserve, and the ramifications of what that means. And that's what everyone is missing. And that's the one thing that I keep harping on. When this happens, you better have your ducks in a row. You better have your house in order, because it's too late if you don't. Because when this happens, you will see a flood, a tsunami of inflation hitting our shores as the world, where there's 2 or 3 or 4 times the amount of dollars outside the country than there is here inside it. You'll see inflation at a level that no one can imagine, and the byproduct of that is spiked interest rates, which blows everything up. And this, to me, is exactly why you are seeing such massive drawdown in supply from the world's exchanges, because the people who have the most money are also closest to the information. And accelerating these trends would be the rumors that are now somewhat substantiated, in that Mexico has formally applied to the BRICS. And the rumor that hasn't been substantiated yet is Japan, Australia, and New Zealand entertaining joining the BRICS. The walls are closing in around us, Dunnigan, and I think you asked for what had happened. I don't think you expected this much of an explanation, but this is in 1 week what has happened. And when you talk about an acceleration of events, this is exactly what this is. And to me, it only is exacerbated by the idiocy and the stupidity of our monetary and fiscal policy here at home, and doing things that make us the laughing stock of the world, like meddling with the election and arresting former President Trump on things that are 1,000 times less meaningful than what the own administration's family has been involved in. And I think the world sees this, that we are becoming a country that certainly is not what we once were or what we stood for. And I think it's time for people to wake the heck up and stop looking at gold and silver to make money, and look at it for what it is. It is a life raft in a boat that's about ready to go over the falls. And I think it's time for people to understand that. And today's market action, I think, kind of explains that.
As we come to the end of this video, I hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. If you have any thoughts or questions about the topics discussed in this video, please leave a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date with our latest content. See you in the next one.